All right, thank you all for coming out here. I'm Audrey Fink, I'm the chair of the Ridgewood Arts Council, and today we are very lucky to have Ashley Zelinskie join us. So she was here earlier today. She did a workshop with some of the kids using the equipment that we have here at the library. We have the laptops and we have the MakerBot in the back where you could take a look at 3D printing at work. So I guess I will turn it over to Drew Martin, who is going to tell us a little bit about Ashley Zelinskie's background, and then we'll just jump right in. All right?
You want the mic?
Yeah. So I met Ashley about 2 years ago.
Yep.
She was at the Javits Center, and there was a 3D printing festival that I went to, or festival.
Yeah, like a convention.
And
Yeah.
so it was people selling machines and filament, and then there was like a maker section where people had little trinkets like you see back there.
Mm-hmm.
And Ashley had this like infinity room, which is this mirrored room with you'll see the Brillo Andy Warhol piece that she had the coating on. And she seemed like so like wonderfully out of place there.
I was wonderfully out of place.
Like, she loved being there, and
Yeah.
we started talking about what she does, and you'll see in a few minutes what she does, which is great. But when we started doing the Arts Council artist talks, I thought, that you'd be perfect for this community
Yeah.
to talk about this intersection of art and science. And she's very into sci-fi and NASA, and you'll
Yeah,
hear
we
more
can
about that
we
later,
can
so,
geek out if you guys want
thank
to.
you for coming. Her fiancé
Thanks
is
for
here
having
from
me.
Australia. So, thank you.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Ashley Zelinskie, and I'm going to give a hopefully quick talk about my work, reverse abstraction. So let's just get into it. So I am a classically trained artist. I studied sculpture and art history at RISD. So I have an all art background. I have no technical education, no computer science education, no 3D modeling education. That's all self-taught after I graduated. So I came to be in this industry and come up with this concept and this idea from a strictly art background. So it all starts here with Joseph Kosuth's 1 in 3 chairs. And Joseph Kosuth is a conceptual artist. This was a piece that he had on display that was a chair, a picture of a chair, and a definition of a chair in a gallery space. And it questions the true nature of the object. What is the chair? Is it the actual physical object, the idea, or the image? And so when he's posing these questions, I was like, oh, these are really great questions, especially if you apply it to today. So I applied it with new technologies. So this is my piece, 1 in 1 chair. And it basically asks the same question as Joseph Kosuth's 1 in 3 chair piece, only using one object. So here you can see the chair. It looks like a chair. I actually modeled it to look just like Joseph Kosuth's chair. But instead of having it in a gallery setting with a definition and a picture, I covered it in code. And so the text that you see that's wrapped around the chair is computer code. And the computer code is for the file, the 3D file, the STL file, and we all learned about those earlier today, of the chair. So I 3D modeled the chair, I saved the file, and then I have a program that reverse engineers that file into its basic machine code. And then I take that code and I wrap it back around onto the sculpture. So here you're seeing the sculpture, how the computer sees it and how the human sees it. So this is actually a rendering. So this is just also cool going back to our 3D print workshop from earlier today. You can actually see this is the design, how it looks in the computer. And that's how it looks once it was 3D printed. So you really get exactly what you're asking for when you're 3D printing. This was 3D printed in SLS by Shapeways, which we all learned about that earlier today too. So it's really a one-to-one. Like the two pictures don't look much different, which is a wonder of 3D printing. So this is 1 in 1 chair. And you can see in this detail shot, you can see the lacy code that makes up the structure. So going back, we're going to start from the basics, because I know that was like a lot to take in, and you're probably still like, what does she mean by it's wrapped in its own code? So your computer thinks in ones and zeros. Your computer thinks in math. So its circuitry works in on and off, 1 and 0. And it's just a constant pattern of these 1s and 0s that make your computer work. So all files, when you go down to the absolute basics, are all made of 1s and 0s. So what I'm doing is taking that information and wrapping objects in that information. So I'm wrapping the object in its own information. So it kind of looks matrixy, but that's how the computer would see the world if it could see. So my body of work is called reverse abstraction, and that term comes from abstraction, which is a term used in art and art history, and a term also used in computer science. So you can see the painting on your left is not abstract to humans, where we consider the painting on the right to be abstract. So it's not a physical, like it's not depicting a person or a physical object. It's a jumble of nonsense and not like a landscape or anything like that. So that's how we think about abstraction in art. The computer thinks about abstraction, and they use that term in computer science, but to mean a very different thing. So when you're thinking about what is real or how you would interpret something as a computer, if you put yourself in the computer's shoes, you think in 1s and 0s. So your whole world exists as 1s and 0s. So the further away you get from those 1s and 0s, they call that layers of abstraction. So your Google browser up on your computer screen is X number of levels of abstraction away from 1s and 0s. So my body of work called reverse abstraction, which this is now being applied to the one-in-one chair, is doing the opposite and the same. So what is abstract to a human, or what is not abstract to a human is abstract to a computer, and what is not abstract to a computer is abstract to a human. So we see the jumble of code as nonsense, as abstraction, and the computer sees our real world as abstraction. So going back to our 3D printing, intro to 3D printing class, this is my one-in-one chair in its baby steps. This was when I was designing it and trying to figure out how to put it together. So the chair over here, I call it Franken chair. This was printed on a MakerBot. Not a nice one like the one you have in the back. This was printed on one of the original MakerBots when they were still pieced together and made of laser cut wood in bits and parts. And you could only print in an area that was like 5 inches by 5 inches by 5 inches. So I tried to print my chair using a MakerBot and quickly found out that it was going to look like this. And I kind of had to stitch it together and piece it together from very small parts. The technology finally caught up to my concept, and I was able to SLS print it at Shapeways. Still in parts, you can't print a whole chair in one piece, but in less parts. So I was able to look at antique furniture and design all of the interlocking parts, like using ideas and like antique furniture designs. So this is a pin and rod intersection. So the two pieces fit together and you put a little pin in and it keeps it from coming apart. So then I started using laser cutters for some of my work. This is a piece called the Mona Lisa, and I took a JPEG image of the Mona Lisa and I put it through my program that spits out a text file for that work of art, and then I placed it back onto the exact same size canvas as the Mona Lisa. So this is a piece of canvas, the exact same size as the Mona Lisa, laser cut containing the code of the image of the Mona Lisa. And you can see it's very flexible because it is laser cut on canvas. This is a detailed shot, so you can see all the numbers. And at first it was really difficult to try to get the laser cutters to be delicate enough to not just totally burn up the canvas. So you can kind of see some of the little burn marks and edges. And this is the Mona Lisa finally in its final form on display at Google's Made with Code exhibition. They did an exhibition where they invited a bunch of women that were in the tech community to come and inspire young women to get into the tech industry and to get into coding, because it's still a field that not many women are into just yet. But we're changing that. There's a couple of girls in the audience. So then I started making these laser cut pieces, but printing the image on it first. So the Mona Lisa, everybody knows what the Mona Lisa looks like. You don't need a visual reference to know what that will look like. But when I started doing more obscure paintings, I started printing them onto the canvases before they were laser cut. So this is one of Gauguin's paintings. It's from his Primitive series. And I had that printed onto the canvas. I took the code from that file that I used to print it, and then I laser cut it back onto the canvas. And through my discovery of laser cutting, my 3D printing work became more advanced. So 3D printing, still to this day, is limited by size. You still have to piece stuff together. The machines are getting bigger and bigger, but they're not getting big enough fast enough for my liking. So laser cutting is the way to go. I started taking my 3D files that were all one piece and exploding them out and making them all flat pieces and laser cutting them and then welding them back together. So this was one of my cubes. Again, it's covered in its own code. And this is the cube once I had it laser cut and then welded together. So you can't 3D print on this scale, obviously. It would just be impossible. But I took all of the sides, each panel of the cube, and laid it flat. And with the same type of files, you're using the same software and the same file types for the laser cutter as you are for the 3D printer. You just have to think 2-dimensionally instead of 3-dimensionally. So it's a really easy conversion from your 3D model to a flat 3D model that then can be like laser cut. And this is the cube in a show in Tribeca. That was a while ago. So this is the Brillo box. This is where this all started. This is how I met Drew. So at the 3D printing fair, convention, 3D, I don't know, it was one of those, where they usually have a bunch of different 3D companies with their machines, and they're all set up, and it's like convention booth style, where companies are just trying to pitch their stuff to other companies and be picked up by other companies. And I was working with Stratasys and Bold Machines, and they were like, we want to make a booth that's crazy, that people see and remember, and not necessarily be pitching what our next 3D printing technology is. So I made this mirror room. It's an infinity room. And inside I had a pedestal with a Brillo box. And the Brillo box is, I don't know if I have a close-up shot. The Brillo box is also made of code. And it's wrapped in its own code and then placed in this. And the whole idea behind this piece was for 3D printing. I was trying to make a commentary on 3D printing in general. If Andy Warhol was alive today, he'd be going crazy over 3D printing. I mean, he was so crazy about printmaking, like just on paper or on canvas. I can't imagine what he would be making today if he knew about 3D printing. So I used his Brillo box as the starting point, and I 3D printed the Brillo box made of code, put it in this room, and I was getting to the idea that like from one file, you can have infinite objects. You just have to design that one thing once, and you can print it out an infinite amount of times. And you can give it to other people, and they can, iterate on it, they can change it, they can print it, but you really have like this starting point of one file, and it just can spread out infinitely from there. So that was the Brillo box room. And then this is the cube. So the cube was a funny story. I got an email one day from the US State Department, and I actually thought it was like a clickbait phishing email. I didn't really think that it was from the US government. I thought it was like the Nigerian prince style, we would like to give you money. So I actually sent it to a couple friends, and they were like, no, this is legit. So I emailed them back, and I was like, I'm really sorry I deleted your email, and I'm getting back to you so late, but is this for real? And they're like, yeah, we really want we want to commission you to make this piece for our embassy in Saudi Arabia. So they bought a small cube piece, and they were like, we want you to make this bigger. Can you make this bigger? And at the time I was like, uh-oh, no. But I was like, yeah, sure, I can totally make this bigger. So I figured out laser cutting, I put it all together, and this piece now lives at the US Embassy in Saudi Arabia. And it was chosen because in Islamic art you can't depict the human form. and lots of their artwork is based around patterns. So they thought this was great because it's math, which like they have a strong basis in math, and it's patterns, and there's no human form depicted. So they were like, this is perfect, like for the embassy. Nobody can get angry with this. Like, this is great. And I was like, it's perfect. So I really enjoyed making this piece, and I like making big things. So if you know anybody looking for a big sculpture, let me know. So this is it displayed in a video piece, an immersive video piece that I made for a gallery called Lightbox in New York. And they came to me and said, we want you to make a 3D immersive interactive piece to put in our gallery, which is, it's got 3D projection mapping throughout the whole gallery. So every wall, you're standing in the video, every wall has projection on it. So this video was actually called Code Density, and it was talking about how dense code is. Because one of my biggest hurdles in my work is code is very long. It's just a lot of information. It's a lot of numbers. It's a lot of letters, a lot of text. And one of my major design challenges is trying to take that text and fit it onto an object. Because the text ends up being like really, really tiny and hard to fit, and you're like jamming it on there. And people don't usually believe me. They're like, well, how hard could that be? Like, how much text is there? And so I created this video where the code wraps around you as you're standing in this space, and it envelops you, and eventually like the computer starts glitching and crashing, and then eventually it turns off. And people, upon exiting the video, asked me, wow, that was so much code. What was that the code for? And it's the code for a blank After Effects file. It's an empty video. It's a blank screen. And just the information you need to set up a blank screen on a video is all, it can fill a room. So that's how dense code can be. So yeah, it is a design challenge. These are my pieces. This is one of the newer series that I'm doing. It's called Human Code. So steering away from computer code and thinking more about the human form. These are 3D scans of me, actually. I've done a couple people, but this in particular is me. So I had a scan of my face done, and then I did a cheek swab. So I got a DNA kit and did a cheek swab with a specific company that does, like, they don't tell you your ancestry, they actually give you the raw data. So when you do one of those cheek swabs, what they're actually looking for is there's 13 points in your genetic code, in your DNA, that are a fingerprint. So most of our genome we share with each other, and even other animals and plants. All of it, like most of it is similar, like 99% of it is similar. But there are these 13 points in your double helix that make you an individual. It's how the FBI tracks you down if you do something naughty. So I'm taking these 13 points and sequencing the DNA into its individual amino acids. So each of your bars of your double helix, you'll have an amino acid, and you get like either one or two, depending upon if your mother and father share the same. So it's either doubling up or it's two different ones. So each letter represents an amino acid in your double helix, basically. And so I'm taking that code and wrapping my head in my genetic code, the parts of my genetic code that make me me. So I like to think of these as super self-portraits because it has the eerie, we were talking about it earlier, like the eerie sense of the 3D scan where you're like, oh, it looks like me, it's so creepy. But then it also it gets even creepier from there because it's your actual genetic information. And then these pieces are actually 3D printed, and then they're electroplated with copper and then gold plated. So this has a gold plating on it. This is the piece I did, and this is at Art Basel, I don't know how many years ago, but this was a piece that I did. I call it Space Triangle, and it is a triangle that I designed to try to be a little bit confusing. It's got like pieces pushing in and pieces missing and pieces coming out, and that's also wrapped in its code. And then this was a feat of engineering. I had that piece printed in burnout PLA. It's PLA that you can use for casting. So you make a mold and then you burn it away, melt it out of the mold, and then you can pour in any other material. So this is a bronze cast version of that. And it took like, I want to say, over a year for the guy to figure out, the foundry to figure out how to cast it, because it needed so many vents and sprues to get in all the little cracks. I probably won't cast anything ever again because of that. I think electroplating is the way to go. So these are my pieces, the platonic solids. These are not electroplated, and I think I have a picture, yeah. This is them electroplated with nickel. So they actually have much more heft to them too. They have much more weight because they are covered in metal, so they feel a little bit nicer for a collector when they are a little bit heavier and more substantial than just like little plastic toys and trinkets. And then this piece is something that I did for NASA. I collaborated with scientists at NASA Goddard who are working on the James Webb Space Telescope. The James Webb Space Telescope is going to be the successor to the Hubble. And so I worked with the scientists on this project. I 3D scanned their arms and then wrapped the arms in their equations and their functions that they used to create the telescope. So these are all the metrics that were used to create the telescope. And they're wrapped around their arms. And their arms are pushing out through this hexagonal dish, and that's actually the model of the main dish on the James Webb Space Telescope. And it's gold plated in the same gold as the telescope. So I used their gold platers for this. And I think that's the last one. Yeah, so that was my latest project. Does anybody have any questions?
How long did you work on it?
Oh, this is the fastest I've ever done a project because they had me come in November to meet the scientists and see the telescope. And they were like, okay, so like we're gonna have a show in March and we need a piece of artwork for that. And in the meantime, I had an art fair that I had to go to, and I was in Europe for a while. And then as soon as my plane landed from Europe, I did a solo exhibition in Europe. As soon as the plane landed, I had to hit the ground running and like get to work. So I like sketched and did the concept, but all of the fabrication had to happen between like, I don't know, when did we get back? Like January 15th, and like it opened like March 15th or something like that. And that's the fastest I've ever been able to produce a work of art. My team worked night and day. I had a lot of very tired people. Yeah. Yeah.
So do you manually wrap the code around those things, or do you have a special algorithm program?
No, I have to manually do all of the code stuff and all the tech stuff. I use Adobe programs. I make everything a vector file. I have to run it through Adobe InDesign because I have to move the kerning and the text size. I have to make sure that everything's touching. Because it is a lacy structure, if all of the letters and numbers aren't touching each other on several different points, the whole thing just falls apart. So I have to go through and make sure that everything's touching each other. And there's no algorithm in the world that can do that, can say that everything's touching and everything's going to stabilize and stay together. So yeah, that's probably the longest part, is trying to get all the code to fit onto the sculpture and then making sure that all of the numbers and letters are touching one another. Yeah.
Did you initially start plating things just for the heft of it, or was there another reason?
Oh yeah. So when you're printing anything that isn't tiny, you're printing it in parts. And plating hides all of the seams. Yeah. So when you glue, I'll glue it together and it'll look fine, but it always kind of looks like it's in pieces. The plating hides that completely. It looks like one piece then. It also helps hold it together because now there's this metal that's like a substantial thing that's holding the whole thing together. So it actually feels like one piece then. It's not gonna like pull apart.
And electric plating, it's not done with heat, so it wouldn't melt anything?
No, they dip it.
Yeah.
And so the company that I'm working with is amazing. I actually they're a NASA company. And so I've been working with them and they're amazing. They have this top secret, they won't even let me see how it works, but it's top secret where they're actually able to impregnate the 3D print with copper molecules. So the print comes out and it's very porous. Do we have an SLS print here? No? So SLS prints are the ones that are using nylon powder and then are fused with lasers. And because of that, it has this very porous, like spongy quality to it. And so they're able to actually like jam somehow copper molecules all the way through. So it's not just that the plating is on the outside, it's all the way through. It's impregnated with it, yeah. And they won't tell me how. It's like not like patented technology. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think they want to keep NASA as their client, so they're not going to tell anyone. I imagine they spend a good deal of money there. Yep.
Hi, I've got two questions. How long have you been involved with this type of art? And then the second question is, because you might have answered in the previous question, the material that once it comes out the model, that's not plastic, all the items are solid plastic, correct?
For what?
Well, you just mentioned a different type of material.
Oh, yeah, so the plastic is inside still.
Oh,
It's mostly used as a skeleton because then the metal is used to like impregnate it. But the nylon powder sculpture still exists inside.
okay, so everything that before gets plated is always plastic?
Most of the time, yeah, most 3D printing is done in plastic. I have straight up 3D printed metal before, but it's not the greatest technology yet. You still get a better print out of the plastic than you'll get out of the metal just straight up. So it's also really expensive to 3D print metal. So I think this is it's a better way of going about doing it. You get a better finish.
And how long have you been doing this?
I graduated from RISD in 2010. So I'll let you do the math. Yeah, no problem. Let's not think about that. Yeah, it's been a while now, and like I said, I had to self-teach everything because they didn't teach this when I went to school. And school's great, everybody should stay in school, but self-teaching is amazing, and you should definitely do that in addition to school, because I feel like when you're teaching yourself and going in the direction you want to go and are very self-motivated, you learn way more and way quicker than when you're sitting in a classroom. So that wasn't a don't go to school. Like, that was stay in school, but supplement. Yep.
Is there a community of artists that are kind of working on the same type of thing?
Sort of. There's not many of us at this time, and I'm definitely standing alone with this kind of stuff. But we are gaining a little bit of ground. People didn't think that, like, they're calling anything that has to do with technology new media. And I don't like that terminology. I consider myself a classic conceptual artist that's just using technology. But they dump me into the new media genre all the time, and fine, I'll take it. But yeah, we are gaining ground. Like, I did a residency at the New Museum at New Inc., and they're an incubator that the museum is running because they think that this is something that they should be investing in and looking into, is this new technology being applied to art. So I definitely think people are coming around to it. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Can you talk about the other project? I know you went to India with the lady tech deal. What was those other projects?
Oh, yeah. So actually, a collector of mine who I met at Art Basel was a really nice woman. Actually, I think you had one of the pieces that I made for her up on the first slideshow, so maybe I can pull that up. Her name is Asha Jeja, and her husband was one of the founding members of Google. He was a teacher at Stanford and taught the founding members of Google and was like a very early investor in Google. So she's just like this tech giant. And so she came to Art Basel and I met her, and she offered to take me to India. She wanted me to teach young women in India 3D printing and coding. And she asked me, do you know any other women that are in this field? And I actually am a member of the Lady Tech Guild, which is a group of women that meet once a month. We're all in the tech industry and in different areas. Like, we have a biohacker, we have people that work in the 3D printing industry, we have 3D designers, 3D animators. All something creative, though, is like our common thread. That's how I do my 3D scanning. A girlfriend of mine runs a 3D scanning company. So we all help each other out and kind of like help lift each other up and get each other jobs, and because the tech industry is still very male heavy, and it kind of can be intimidating as a woman in the tech industry, so we're helping each other out. So when she said, do you know any girls that do this? I was like, yeah, I actually know a bunch of them. I have 7 friends I can bring. And she's like, get on a plane. So the next month we were on a plane to India. Yeah, it happened really fast. The next month we were on a plane to India, to Ahmedabad, and we did a Maker Fair style. It's called Maker Fest, but it's in the same, it's the same as a Maker Fair, where we had a booth and we did workshops and we taught classes and did lectures. And we were there for 2 weeks, and we just met some of the most incredible people on earth, like these little girls that had never even seen a 3D printer before, and we were having them 3D print by the end of the week. It was great. So I do like doing that kind of stuff. We also just it was really crazy just to see trying to empower these women in this country, give them the tools so that they can have the education to then go out and spank all the dudes. Because they were kicking some butt. But that was fun, yeah. And so I still work with her, and the Lady Tech Guild is now sort of in charge of running this Maker Fair in India now. And we're planning and bringing people to India. So if you know any young women that are interested in coding and would like to apply, please let me know. Anything else?
And you can talk about some of your personal interests, I mentioned you were into science,
Yeah.
I saw watches, what?
Oh yeah. Sci-fi is a big thing in our household. We watch a bunch of sci-fi, Star Trek. Our kitchen is Star Trek themed. Anybody who comes to my studio always comments about my Spock posters that I have everywhere, and all of my models that are in bell jars of different starships that I have created. It's dorky. It gets really dorky. But yeah, I love working with NASA. I hope to be doing so for a long time. They've had me back several times. I went to a rocket launch last September. That was crazy. I got to ride in the bus with all the scientists and hang out with all the scientists all day, and the rocket launch was just a very moving experience. You feel like a very, very tiny speck of dust. If you ever have a chance, you can apply online. They call them NASA Socials, and you can apply. Anybody can apply. And they take a lot of teachers and educators too. So if you have something like that you can pitch to them, go to a rocket launch. It'll change your life. Yeah. And that's how I got hooked up with NASA to do this piece for them. Was I met a bunch of scientists, and they said, hey, you should do this collaboration where you make artwork for NASA Goddard to promote the James Webb Space Telescope and to make some works of art. And it was actually in the visitor center at NASA Goddard for a while, and they said they got a lot of foot traffic into the visitor center and a lot more questions about the telescope because people were coming to see this exhibition. And so they threw a bunch of parties and had openings and had scientists there, and just generated a lot of interest in this amazing project that should just generate interest on its own. Everybody should be watching what they're doing. They're doing crazy stuff.